Hello and welcome. I am TheWrap's executive editor, Adam Chitwood. I'm joined here today by TheWrap's esteemed senior writer, Drew Taylor, and we are discussing how Disney Plus has devalued the brands of Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar. Drew wrote this explosive report that published on TheWrap. You can read the full story over at TheWrap on Wrap Pro as part of our subscription service. It's a wonderful, illuminating deep dive into basically what has happened since 2019 for the Disney brands since Disney Plus launched. Drew, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm great, and I'm happy to be here, and I love talking about Disney, as you know. So it's a thrill.
You do. Drew is, I've known Drew for a long time. He is a Disney expert. You ask him any factoid about Disney, Disney parks, Disney animation, he's got it. So, I trust him when he comes and tells me, hey, I'm pretty sure that the Disney Plus brand has devalued all of Disney's arms. So, Drew, why don't you kind of walk us through the premise of your story here? And it's deeply reported. You've got a lot of sources talking to you and a lot of data in here. Walk us through the premise. How has Disney Plus devalued the Disney brands?
Well, let's go back to November 2019 when Disney Plus launched. It was a huge, moment for the company. This was sort of Iger's, legacy play as he was going out, the first time. And, a few months later, obviously it proved invaluable to the company because COVID-19 hit and the parks were down, the cruise ships were down, but they had Disney Plus. They had all this content. Movies that were supposed to be going to theaters went directly to Disney Plus, and it seemed great. But I think the toll of this is that, yeah, like you said, all of the Disney brands have been sort of devalued by the insistence from Iger and Chapek to pump all this content into Disney Plus. So we had three, Pixar movies go directly to Disney Plus, and they've had sort of a tough time getting back on their feet outside of sequels. And Marvel has had this tremendous hit because they put all these shows on the service, and then the shows led into the movies and back and forth, and that didn't really work. And then, Lucasfilm, we haven't had a new movie since right around the time that the service started in December 2019. So there's just been a ton of Disney Plus Star Wars shows that have kind of, as we show in charts and graphs and things, that the viewership has gone down and the interest has gone down in these properties. So yeah, it's been a huge hit. I mean, this is what happens when a 100-year-old film company decides to be a tech company overnight. It just there's going to be some growing pains, but the kind of like hit to the legacy of these brands is pretty astounding.
Well, and explain to me, I think to some readers, they might be under the impression, Disney Plus is a huge hit. It's one of the most popular streaming services, it has the most subscribers, or some of the most subscribers. It's still trailing Netflix, we think. And it's turning a profit. So like, how can that be bad? What is the trade-off here? What's happening in the Disney company that is negatively impacting all of their operations?
Well, I mean, these shows are hugely expensive, and we talk about Win or Lose in the piece, which is Pixar's first long form TV series, and the kind of drain on talent and the stress on the pipeline that's already been developed at some of these places is huge. And yeah, I mean, they're just so expensive. I mean, the two seasons of Andor cost something like $650 million, and I think that what you're seeing when people say, "Oh, Disney Plus is a huge success," is that Disney Plus is becoming more and more of a kind of like library of Disney content. It's not the place we're not all watching a new Disney Plus show every Sunday night. It's not that appointment television. It's something like Andor will pop off and be incredible and brilliant, but most of the time they are just laddering into the prerequisite company synergistic goals, which is putting these Marvel characters out there so that they can be used in TV and film later, and things like we talk about the live action movies, the just adding to the pipeline of the live action adaptations of animated products. And two of the biggest hits for Disney in the last year, Moana 2 and Lilo and Stitch, were both originally Disney Plus projects. So, it says something to me that they escaped Disney Plus and became huge instead of staying on Disney Plus and being something that maybe people watched, maybe they didn't, maybe they turned on while they're cooking dinner. But yeah, I mean, the kind of hotbed of interest and activity that you see in some of these other streamers, Netflix, and even things like the stuff on Hulu that's on Disney Plus, which is an added cost, obviously, but things like The Bear and Alien Earth and those things are all outside of the kind of Disney Plus ecosystem. So, yeah.
Well, you're right. We're sitting here. The next season of Wednesday, one of Netflix's most popular shows of all time, is about to hit. There's a new season of Stranger Things coming later this year that everyone is highly anticipating. Meanwhile, Disney Plus just dropped a Marvel show that it seems like no one watched, and that came after another Marvel show that it also seemed like no one watched.
Yeah.
What are you hearing internally from folks inside Disney about the impact of Disney Plus on the stuff that they're making? Because they want people to see it, obviously, and Disney Plus has a really huge platform. Do they feel like their stuff is not getting seen?
Yeah, I mean, not only is it this incredible drain on everybody's resources, because that's the other thing that we haven't talked about, is it's not like they set up a division for Disney Plus production. So it's not like Disney Plus has its own kind of like units. They were leaning on the pre-existing business units within Disney to produce this stuff. So people that were just making movies or just making animated features were now responsible for making television series. And it's a completely different system. And I feel like, these people and these executives and these creatives were sort of working through all this in the most public lens possible. But yeah, they feel like they aren't getting what they deserve, and the shows are, getting burned off. Like we saw Andor got burned off in 4 weeks, which was a 12 episode series, one of the longer series on Disney Plus. And part of that, I was told, was because they didn't want to spend the marketing each week, because it costs a lot to re-engage with people, to put up things on social, to create new assets, and that's just not something that Disney wants to do. They just want to kind of like put it on there, I guess, and have it live. But conversely, a lot of the things that they produce for Disney Plus, especially initially, aren't even on the service anymore. Big movies that they had, the one and only Ivan, which Angelina Jolie produced, Atticus, what was it called? Artemis Fowl, which was directed by Kenneth Branagh, is not there anymore. Togo, which is one of my favorite Disney Plus movies, is not even available anywhere. It's just gone. It's just gone. You can't buy it. You can't watch it. And so, yeah, I mean, if that's the approach that Disney is taking, the Willow show, talk about Lucasfilm, completely gone. So yeah, it's not very heartening for creators or executives to have this be the trajectory of these projects.
Well, and I think it also says something. You look at the landscape in 2019, there was this rush of all the streaming services, especially during the pandemic, of streaming original films. That largely has gone away. HBO Max launched with a new Seth Rogen movie, An American Pickle. I think that has been removed from the streaming service. That's no longer there. There were kind of these big, bold plays that these other streamers were trying to combat Netflix with. And now, by and large, you look at HBO Max, Paramount Plus, Disney Plus, the original film side of those has gone down. They are either, like you said, taking Lilo and Stitch or Moana 2 and putting it in theaters because it's big enough, or they're angling in Disney Plus. It seems like right now, kind of more like Disney Channel original movies, stuff geared towards kids and teens, and that's what their original feature product looks like. Which is a stark difference from the landscape in which Disney Plus launched. I did want to ask you, so let's go through brand by brand, because you do a really good job in the story of going through these three brands: Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Pixar, and how Disney Plus has harmed them. So let's start with Marvel, because that's kind of on the tip of everyone's tongues right now, because we're just coming off, Fantastic Four launched with I think over $110 million at the box office 2 weeks ago. Everyone's breathing a sigh of relief. Marvel's finally back after a few blunders. And then second weekend, it tumbles 66%. This is a really steep drop off in box office for this movie. This seems to suggest that opening weekend was really just hardcore fans. And the movie going habits that fueled Marvel throughout the 2010s to 800, 900 million, $1 billion box office per movie may be gone. So what did your reporting, your investigation turn up around Marvel and how Disney Plus has harmed that brand?
Well, we looked at things like the Thunderbolts, which came out earlier this year, which is a wonderful movie, but didn't really connect the way that it should have. I don't think it breached 400 million worldwide. And the Marvels from I think 2023, which was something that did even worse. I think it was like around 200 million worldwide. And the thing that both of these movies had in common was that most of the characters were from the Disney Plus shows. The Marvels, you had to watch WandaVision and Miss Marvel to understand what was going on. There's a ton of characters in Thunderbolts that are from the Falcon and Winter Soldier, as well as Black Widow, which was one of those hybrid premieres where it was in theaters but on Disney Plus at the same time, which they briefly tried to do for a surcharge. And yeah, to what you're alluding to, the emphasis on the shows and having to watch the shows and the movies has totally killed that kind of like baseline Marvel fan who, you're right, would turn something like Captain Marvel into $1 billion movie. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's it's an okay movie, but like, it was just some average
Everybody
Marvel
went.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, everybody
we
went.
went because
And
it was
so
a new Marvel movie.
yeah, and that kind of like casual Marvel fan is just not there anymore. And I think that's what Fantastic Four showed us was, as you said, like all the Marvel diehards went the first weekend. But it used to be that your mom could watch a Iron Man movie every 3 years and still understand what was going on in the universe. And now it's just become so cumbersome and complicated. And like you were saying, Eyes of Wakanda, which is a really terrific animated series, 4 episodes. Disney just rushed it out the door. I mean, they bumped it up a week, did not really tell anyone, and just kind of dropped it on the service, which, like we are saying, it did not fulfill the promise of these creators who spent, years working on the show and thinking that it was going to get the grand kind of Marvel rollout. It's just like, kind of disused. But yeah, I mean, I think Marvel has been the brand that's been hurt the most, especially if you look at the pre Disney Plus era and the post Disney Plus era. There are outliers like the fourth Thor movie made 800 million something dollars. I mean, and also Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which did rely a lot on WandaVision, but I think still you could get it. All the
Mm-hmm.
characters were not from shows, and so yeah. But I think those
Deadpool and
those kind of
Wolverine
numbers,
obviously made
Deadpool,
a billion
yes,
last year.
yes, which incorporated stuff from Loki, the TVA, and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
again, very kind of casually, mixing in. You didn't have to watch Loki to know what was going on in Deadpool and Wolverine. And I think that is like the thing that made it a hit. You didn't have to do, our box office reporter Jeremy Fooster calls it homework. That was what Fantastic Four was supposed to bring back, was the lack of homework, and it still didn't connect. So, yeah, I think that they're having some serious conversations at the Marvel HQ because, yeah, this is like a irreparable kind of damage.
Yeah, and in your story, Kevin Feige sat with a number of reporters a couple of weeks ago, including a couple of reporters from TheWrap. And your story quotes him. He said this. He said, with regards to the Marvels, which only made $206 million globally, and it's a sequel to a film that made 1 billion. Feige said, people are like, okay, I recognize her from $1 billion movie, but who are those other two? I guess they were in some TV show. I'll skip it. And then later, Feige bluntly said to reporters, the expansion is what devalued the Marvel brand. It was just too much. It was a big company push, and it doesn't take too much to push us to go. There was a mandate that we were put in the middle of. And he acknowledged that because Disney was saying, go, make as much as you can, when Oscar Isaac says he's interested in a Moon Knight TV series, Feige says, all right, I guess we'll greenlight that. And
Yeah.
the thing that had kept Marvel going through those ensuing years was a really tight creative control. Now, there are bad Marvel movies. Not every Marvel movie made in that period was great, but there was a cohesion that was kind of tying them together. And there was a base level of quality that you kind of felt like you were going to get with each Marvel movie out. So, your story also gets into this viewership issue that we have with the Marvel shows, which is, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki were the first three that came out. There was much excitement, anticipation around those. And then after that, you start to see a drop off. She-Hulk, Secret Invasion, Ironheart, really just not up to snuff. And to your point, what's interesting is that Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four got pretty good reviews. Like, these were not movies. The Marvels was pretty critically shellacked, but these two films got pretty good reviews. Even that wasn't enough to get the folks out to come and see. So Marvel's got a problem right now.
Yeah. And what's been interesting too is that, again, they didn't really know how to make shows back then. And especially if you look at the early shows, they sort of don't really feel like TV shows in terms of like structure. And I had heard stories about how much they were changing Moon Knight like up until the very last minute. There's a third personality that is introduced in the finale of Moon Knight, and I'd heard that personality had been introduced like episodes earlier, and they just kept kind of like reconfiguring things because that's the Marvel way. I mean, that's how they do these shows, is they work on them up until the very last minute. But applying that to a streaming series, throws everything into chaos. So yeah,
And
it's
WandaVision was supposed to come out after Doctor Strange 2, and now it
yep.
came out before, with Elizabeth Olsen playing a major character in Doctor Strange 2. So they reworked the finale of WandaVision
Yes.
to make it match and fit. And now, how many years later, all of that continuity, all of those interconnectedness is kind of, Feige and Marvel are just saying like, we're going to kind of start over.
Yeah. He's promising fewer homework things. And in that conversation that he had at Marvel Studios, he said that maybe characters will go from shows to movies, but rarely will characters go from movies to shows. So it seems like he's more interested in delineating the kind of like gumbo that Marvel has become. So yeah, but I don't know how they get back to it.
I mean, it should be said, they knew this problem existed. So what, like 6 months ago, maybe longer than that, they announced that Marvel Television, they were going to call the TV shows under a brand called Marvel Television. They would now be less connected to the movies. They would now be treated like TV shows, ongoing series, less like one-off limited series connected to the movies, which is kind of a full circle moment going back to what Marvel TV was before Kevin Feige and the MCU got involved in expanding.
And then there's like weird designations like Marvel Spotlight, which is what Echo was, which was supposed to be completely separate, even though it is so connected to Daredevil and Hawkeye. And then there's these special presentations, which are kind of like mini movies that James Gunn did one. And then there was Michael Giacchino's Werewolf by Night. They're doing a new Punisher one that's supposed to be kind of a coda to the second season of Daredevil. But I mean, that's really like the fact that Loki is the only thing that's gotten a second season so far. I mean, the Daredevil stuff was built in, but yeah, it's just like the metrics of successful TV shows, if you're kind of judging them by the old school, you see the kind of shortcomings of Marvel there too.
Yeah. So what happens next? Marvel's basically kind of going on ice. The next Marvel movie to come out will be the next Spider-Man film, which has started production, but that is, of course, a co-production with Sony Pictures. Sony's putting that out. Marvel is taking creative lead, as they do. That comes out next summer. And then next Christmas is Avengers Doomsday. That's the first one, right? Doomsday, which is bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as Dr. Doom. Does this seem like a reset, a way for them to kind of get folks back involved?
Yeah, I mean they're trying. I don't know if it's going to work. And the only things on the Disney Plus side are the second season of Daredevil, which was announced when they announced the show, and then Vision Quest, which is sort of the third chapter of the WandaVision saga, which started with WandaVision, went to Agatha all along, and then is now continuing with Vision Quest. But I think I have hopes for that. It's Terry Matalas who did Picard, which I loved, but yeah, I mean, it's really slowing down. We're not seeing, 4 shows a year and 5 movies anymore. It's really, I mean, I hope they take this time and kind of reconfigure things and see what works and what doesn't and try to maintain things. But, we're on the cusp of another, kind of era of Marvel with the X-Men being introduced and all that. So maybe they're seeing that as kind of a fresh start. Feige said during that kind of press conference that Secret Wars is going to reset a lot of things. So who knows? Are we going to see a new Iron Man? Are we going to see a new, and will those adventures be on the small screen as well as the big screen? Is the big question.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go over to Star Wars. What did you learn about Star Wars? How did Star Wars come to...
It's the same thing with Marvel, where it's like more is not more. I mean, we have the charts, and I think the peak of it was Mando season 2. So everybody kind of bought into Mandalorian. They love Baby Grogu.
It
the
was huge.
numbers.
It was,
It was
it
huge.
launched the streaming service. The Mandalorian was
Yes.
massive. So
Yes.
huge hit.
First live action Star Wars show ever.
Mhm.
And yeah, people were really enamored. And then, there was this thing in 2020 called Investors Day where they announced all of these things, all of these spin-offs. And so it was a lot of things that never materialized, but we ended up getting Book of Boba Fett, and then season 3 of Mandalorian, which wasn't quite the sensation. And then the subsequent series have just kind of not really done a lot in terms of engagement or excitement. There was Obi-Wan Kenobi, which started off strong, but kind of was middling. And then things like Skeleton Crew, which I've heard were like so expensive, and then just did not bring the kind of awareness, the discussion, anything. And it's a shame because that show is really fun, but like, it's too much. And we have a great quote by a friend of mine, Dan Zier, who runs a Lucasfilm podcast and has written books for Lucasfilm. And he kind of says, Star Wars is always better when it's treated like a fine meal and not fast food. And it really has been treated like fast food. I mean, there's just so many things coming out, and that's discounting all of the animated stuff, which is, there's Lego shows and spin-offs of Clone Wars and all this stuff that it's just impossible to keep up with. And what was so funny was when Lucasfilm was purchased by Disney, they negated all of that canonical stuff, all the extended universe stuff, and they kind of started over from scratch. And now it's just kind of like built up to this unbelievable degree. And much like the live action, Lilo and Stitch, instead of doing another season of Mandalorian, they decided to turn it into a movie, which is going to be really interesting to see how that turns out. But that will have been the first feature since Rise of Skywalker in 2019, which premiered a month after Disney Plus did.
Well, and it should be said, Lucasfilm was already in I should say, a tricky position with Star Wars when they started expanding into TV shows, because Force Awakens was this massive hit. It relaunched the Star Wars franchise, introduced these new characters: Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, Oscar Isaac, John Boyega. Everyone loved them. Huge. Last Jedi, another massive hit, critically adored, but the Star Wars superfans, very divisive. There was a really strong divisive reaction to that. And in between, Lucasfilm starts trying to make these spin-offs, and Rogue One works. Rogue One's a hit, makes $1 billion. And then they try to rush it, kind of, as you said, not the fast food. You get this Solo movie, which comes out 6 months after Last Jedi.
Yep.
And it makes 300-400 million at the worldwide box office, which, in comparative terms, is not as strong of a hit. And then Rise of Skywalker comes out, which concludes this film trilogy, which is critically reviled, and the fans kind of greet it with a shrug. So you can understand Disney's position here, which is, let's kind of sit back and reconfigure the films, but since Mandalorian's working, let's go whole hog into the TV shows. But I think it's interesting in that shows like Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Ahsoka seem to be on paper what the fans want, and yet you can't really scale Star Wars that way. It
Yeah.
is not, the viewership's not there. It's not causing people to sign up to Disney Plus just to subscribe to watch these shows. They are playing to a very specific subset of the Star Wars fandom, but it is a much smaller scale than the people that are turning out for those films.
Yeah, and Obi-Wan was initially one of those in between movies. It was a Star Wars story project that they reconfigured for a show, and that had huge issues. It shut down production for a while. And then something like The Acolyte, which was set in this new time frame called the High Republic, that was introduced in a kind of publishing initiative a few years ago, didn't connect and was clearly meant to be a multi-season show. I mean, there were so many cliffhangers that the show introduced that did not follow up on. And yeah, the interest was just not there. I mean, you look at the numbers and it looks like Ahsoka has like the bare minimum, in terms of viewership to go forward. But that also is a passion project of Dave Filoni, who is one of the chief creative executives at Lucasfilm. So yeah, it's in a real pickle right now, for sure.
And they're putting their chips on this Mandalorian Grogu film, which comes out next May, right?
Yes.
And then after that, they're about to start production on a new film starring Ryan Gosling, which will kind of be the first new Star Wars movie in a very long time. So
yeah, and that'll be the year
show up
afterwards. Yeah.
But
Yeah, but
you know,
they kind of like seeded their. You remember that when it was like Star Wars was kind of like the Christmas event for
right.
a few years, and they kind of like
Hmm.
seeded that. Now that's going to go to Marvel. Yeah, it's just really interesting. The positioning. They seem to be very sort of like, they're re-entering the waters in May, which is when the '77 movie came out, and so it's very interesting to see what this next era of Lucasfilm will be. But much like Marvel, they've completely kind of like throttled back in terms of production on shows.
Hmm.
There is maybe a brand new show in development, but it has not been greenlit. And then we have the second season of Ahsoka coming out, and it's like I think that's it, right, in terms of things that they've announced. So
Yep.
yeah, it's
And
it's
the
interesting.
Acolyte was the first to be like publicly canceled, and
Yes,
that had its own fair share of controversy
yeah,
when that was
they were
rolling out.
gearing up for season two in England, like that was happening, and we
Hmm.
have Tony Gilroy's on record saying that if they hadn't greenlit two seasons off the bat, that Andor would not have come back either.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. All right, and now let's talk about Pixar, which seems to be maybe the brand that was hurt the most out of these three in terms of financial stability. So tell me
yeah.
about Pixar's journey here with Disney Plus.
Well, Pixar. Yeah, I really feel for Pixar because in 2020 they sent Soul directly to Disney Plus, which was I think the right move. Theaters were not open yet, and it ended up winning two Oscars still. But since then, Luca and Turning Red both went to Disney Plus, and what it did was kind of set this, expectation that original Pixar stuff is going to debut on Disney Plus, and then the sequels. Those are the kinds of things you'll want to go out to the theater for. So the first movie back was Lightyear in 2022, which came out like 4 months after Turning Red debuted on Disney Plus. It ostensibly is an extension of the Toy Story franchise, but it's an original kind of sci-fi adventure. Disappointed at the box office. Elemental, which was the next original after that, had a very slow start. Ended up making almost 500 million worldwide, largely due to overseas box office. So I mean that was sort of initially written off and then kind of came back. And then this year we saw Elio come out, which is going to be the first Pixar movie to not make $100 million domestically since Onward, which came out 6 days before the pandemic shut down all the movie theaters. And what Jeremy Fuster, our box office reporter, has told me is if it had stayed in theaters, it would have definitely made $100 million, but the theaters were closed. So Elio comes out a year after Inside Out 2 makes like 1.6 billion or something. And it's like, it's just totally flatlining. And it's just, it's sad because it's hard to change people's viewing habits, and it's even harder to change them back. So
Yeah.
that is the big question going forward, because they have all these original animated movies in the pipeline. They had an amazing presentation at Annecy this year where they showed off all these like incredible original movies. But is Hoppers going to connect in the same way as one of these things? They're kind of hedging their bets because they've got Hoppers and Toy Story 5 next year, which Toy Story 5 is going to make more money than they can count. But yeah, they've really been put in this precarious position. And then they also were leaned on to make short form and long form content for Disney Plus, which was kind of a nightmare because it just messed with the pipeline of everything. And that's why when you saw those layoffs a couple of years ago, it was after Win or Lose and Dream Productions had finished production, so they didn't need people. It was like,
Hmm.
they kind of swelled artificially and then had to get rid of people when these things didn't go forward. And as we talk about in the story, there was another long form series that was supposed to come after Win or Lose, which they just canceled and might rework into a movie. But it's just hugely disruptive to their process. And the
Right.
shows, I've heard that the budgets were not, they weren't $200 million, but they were still a lot of money and,
Hmm.
a lot of resources, even with recycling assets and things. You watch Win or Lose and you can kind of pick out, oh, there's that house from that other movie or whatever. But, they were hugely expensive. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what Pixar is going to do, but they didn't do anything wrong. They were just following these corporate mandates, and it ended up really costing them a lot in the long run.
Right. Well, and it's not like I think something a lot of people don't realize is that Pixar films are essentially handmade. Like it's there at that studio. A lot of other animated films are using a bunch of different vendors and a lot of different artists kind of around the world to make movies. Pixar is more expensive because they're animators, their artists are all there in Emeryville, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I look at the theme parks a lot in terms of how these things are kind of reaching people, and you do see now there's like there's turning red characters in parades and things, but
Hmm.
it's like there hasn't been that level of kind of like you know kind of cross company acceptance of these projects. We're not seeing sequel. We haven't seen a sequel to any of the Disney Plus movies. Luca is not in California Adventure, taking photos of people. So, it's like
I know you would love
it's
that. I know
really
you'd love to see
interesting
Luca out
how
there at
the
California.
debut on Disney Plus has kind of like impeded its growth in terms of other segments of the company. But yeah,
Yeah, because you have this handful of films that all came out during the pandemic that went straight to Disney Plus, and I imagine on Disney's side they can see the streaming numbers and they can see that maybe they were popular and maybe they did do well, but it's hard to quantify would people go to a movie theater and buy a ticket for a sequel to this. There is
yeah,
no there's no asking someone to watch a movie on streaming is not the same as asking someone to get a babysitter or take a family of 4 or 5 out to the theater and spend $100 on tickets and popcorn.
yes,
Those are two very different things. And so I think, you also wrote a really great piece a couple of weeks ago about how original animation isn't dead, it's just moved to streaming. I think Pixar is very much dealing with this existential problem that a lot of animation seems to be dealing with, which is convincing families, honestly, to go see an original animated movie in a theater with their kid.
yeah,
I have a kid, I have a 3.5-year-old. It is expensive to do it. And also, if you have a kid who is temperamental or may want to get up and leave in the middle of it, spending $100 to, have to ditch the movie in the middle of it or the kid doesn't like it is a big investment, especially when in 3 to 4 months that movie is going to be on Disney Plus for you to watch at home, which is
yeah.
what Luca, Turning Red, and Soul taught families to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And they haven't slowed down on that. We still don't have a release date
Mhm.
for Elio, even though it came out in June and has not performed. But
Yeah.
I'm sure when Elio goes on Disney Plus, it's going to be a huge hit. Like, just like, you know, and we can talk about the Walt Disney Animation Studios, kind of like getting around this. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's
So how
it's
did
a
they get
real
around it? I mean, here's the other X factor we haven't talked about is Inside Out was massive last year,
it was
highest grossing
huge.
movie of the year.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And then,
sequels are it's a brand that it's a promise to the consumer that if you're going to bring your family for $100, you know that your kid and your family are going to have some base level of enjoyment for this thing. So on that
yes,
level, Pixar seems to be in better position than a Marvel or a Star Wars, where kind of the brand tarnishment has happened. It's more of
yes.
the investment at this point on the consumer standpoint.
Yeah, and there were huge plans for Lightyear. I mean, huge company-wide plans that were just kind of wiped out by this lack of box office interest. And yeah, it's tough. I mean, we could talk about Disney Animation. They had the smarts to kind of get out of the Disney Plus game by turning Moana into a feature movie. Maybe
Moana
people don't
2.
know that Moana 2 was originally a series called Moana that was on going to be on Disney Plus, and those directors kind of just came with it to the feature side of things, and ended up making over $1 billion. They did short form content for Zootopia and Big Hero 6. That was it, and those are just great kind of like sustain plays to just kind of keep the brand alive. And then Moana 2 went to theaters, and then they're reconfiguring the Tiana show into a special. But they also are hugely beneficial in terms of things that go on Disney Plus, because Encanto came out pretty early in the pandemic, didn't do anything. It went to Disney Plus a month later, and it became huge. I mean, one of the most watched things on streaming ever. And now they're building, Encanto rides and, doing all of these things. And I'm sure we'll get a sequel sooner rather than later. But I don't know. They seem to somehow have used the Disney Plus platform to their advantage in terms of, stoking interest in pre-existing properties, creating things that, you know, will go on to theatrical, sequels and, theme park attractions and things like that. But the big thing that Disney Animation got from this deal is the second studio in Canada, which was formed to produce content for Disney Plus, but they've since used to lean on to complete these big projects like the Moana 2 theatrical release and Zootopia 2 coming out in Thanksgiving. So, of all the brands, not only has Walt Disney Animation kind of negated the stigma, but also they've gotten something out of it, which is really interesting. And I would also say that Disney live action has kind of been, I would say they kind of have not taken a huge hit, and used, Freakier Friday, which is coming out this week, was a Disney Plus project. Lilo and Stitch was a Disney Plus project. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
They just moved. They had the forethought, or maybe they had early enough blunders. I mean, Raya and the Last Dragon was another movie that went to streaming, didn't do very well. Moana or Mulan, the live action Mulan, was that a hybrid? Was that one of those that was
it
like,
was a premiere access. Yeah, I think
yeah.
Raya was too, where you'd pay more for it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Strange World did very poorly in theaters. So, but it sounds like Disney probably saw the road ahead, and they're like, "All right, we gotta rejigger some things here." So,
Yes. Yeah. And Moana 2 was in place of a original animated movie that was planned that was scrapped. So yeah, Wish what
so
came
what's
out
the answer
last
here?
year.
Is it just sequels? I mean, we're recording this before Disney's going to report Q2 earnings for the year. Disney's doing great as a company; like they're doing fine. We're not here saying like they're doing terribly, but there is something of an existential crisis when it comes to its three biggest brands right now. So
They seem to be just scaling way back in terms of production of new things for Disney Plus, and the streaming service is a huge drain on the studio in terms of money and resources and things like that. And yeah, I mean, Bob Iger loves to tout the IP. I mean, this is the man that bought Lucasfilm and the 21st Century Fox assets and Pixar. So yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
It'll be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see the kind of Disney Plus model applied to Hulu, because we're getting the Alien show in a couple weeks or next week. So yeah,
yeah,
I don't know. It'll be interesting, but it's just kind of a bummer because the company has been built on original ideas and original, and forward thinking technology and all this stuff that seems to be kind of going by the wayside in favor of the surer bets in terms of IP and sequels and things like that.
yeah.
Although I don't know, there's an original Disney animated movie next year. There's an original Pixar movie next year. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming down the pipe, but I think a lot of it'll be going to theaters first, and I think that's a way to ensure that people at least watch it on Disney Plus.
Yeah. I mean, again, we should note Disney Plus is profitable. It's a profitable streaming service for them, but it is, as Drew's thorough reporting has uncovered, it is having a significant adverse effect on the brands, especially when it comes to theatrical, which is a massive part of the studio's business. So,
Yeah.
and is not a good time for that to be happening because, given post pandemic, everyone's trying to kind of claw their way back to some sort of semblance of normal at the box office. You don't want any extra uh, baggage weighing you down, or anything extra that's going to harm you at the box office there. So,
No, you're right. And all of the kind of business units that were shut down for the pandemic are back, and we've seen Universal make big strides in terms of theme parks. There's talk that they're going to buy a cruise line soon. So, I mean, this is going to be Disney's got its work cut out for them, and they've got to keep innovating, and they've got to keep, making things fresh. But I think that Disney Plus will largely become something that you and I remember as kids, the Disney Vault, where all the Disney movies would go after, being in stores for 30 days. I think that Disney Plus will become the Disney Vault. And the next campaign that I would love to see is for all of the hundreds of hours of Disney content that isn't on Disney Plus yet, to get that on there. And I don't know what it'll take, but I think that's what the next kind of wave of Disney Plus will be.
yeah, I mean, it's a great library for families. Again, I'm a father of a 3.5-year-old. We watch a bunch of stuff on there, but we're not necessarily watching new content beyond their preschool content, which I think is doing pretty well. So,
But that also is a lot of that debuts on Disney Channel first.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
yeah.
yep. Well, Drew, thanks so much for chatting with me. For those watching at home, please go read Drew's story at TheWrap.com. Subscribe to The Wrap Pro, which is a subscription service. You get much more of this kind of deeply reported, really kind of in-depth content, insights that are essential to the industry. So thanks for watching.